I think it's 11 o'clock. I'm going to start off. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for giving your time for with this webinar. We've got excellent speakers, 6 excellent speakers. We've got Kartik, who's a surgeon in Southport and Ormskirk, Professor Raju Vaishya from Delhi, Nick Bakti, consultant in East Kent, Professor Amar Rangan, who most people know, shoulder surgeon and current president of BES, as well as Lado, who's a shoulder surgeon in Ljubljana, Slovenia, and our Maneesh Bhatia as well. So with much further ado, I am going to start off with Karthik's presentation.
Hi, my name is Kartik, Kartik Iyengar. Today I've been asked by Professor Singh to talk on academic publication and how they have helped me. If you guys give me a minute, I will share my screen. I have done most of my undergraduate and postgraduate training in a place called Nagpur. Nagpur, as some of you may be knowing, is in central India, and I have fond memories of the city and my college. It's famous for oranges. Currently, I work at Southport and Formby District General Hospital. When Professor Singh asked me to talk on this topic, I was scratching my head. However, I would like to uh, elaborate on how academic publications have helped me. People undertake a publication for various reasons. When I started, it was purely for academic reasons and academic progress. However, following few publications, it has become a hobby for me. I enjoy it. I would like to refer you to a famous poem by Robert Frost. What he is referring to is, we are what we are on the choices we make. I have been traditionally and currently a career orthopedic surgeon. However, I have still taken a step back and gone on a path which is less trodden towards academic publication. Academic publications have helped me professionally, academically, and in my personal life. These are some of the points I would like to elaborate on. As you all know, H index is an independent research metric. It replicates or reflects independent researchers' output in terms of articles and citations. For example, an associate professor usually tends to have a H index about 10 to 15, a professor 15, or many more. Over the ensuing last few years, I have continued and published articles which has led to my H index improving to 14. Academic publications have helped me to become a faculty member of the Faculty of Surgical Trainers, and at this late stage of my career, it has given me an additional degree. It has also provided me a supportive evidence to become a member of the board of JCIE, and I believe I am one of the few ones in my region. I became an editorial board member of JCOT in March 2019. Academic publications have allowed me to have a better understanding of research and publications. I've learned how an editorial process works. I can undertake peer review better, and this definitely has helped me in my editorial progress. As you can see on the left, I started off with an H index of 7 and became a board member. Currently, my H index is 14. Hence, I'm going to request my editor-in-chief for a promotion, and I hope he is listening. I'm currently an honorary clinical lecturer at University of Liverpool. I'm the specialty trauma lead for year 3 undergraduates. Academic publication has helped me give feedback better. I'm able to assess portfolios for a various spectrum of trainees and doctors and can give suggestion how to improve their portfolios. As a part of the mentorship program at Manchester, I aim to undertake mentorship for trainees and help them with academic publications. Over the ensuing last 2-3 years, I have empowered all my junior colleagues in achieving peer-reviewed publications, helping them in their ARCP, and also my senior colleagues to help them gather supportive evidence towards their appraisal and revalidation. Academic publication, I feel, has made me a better collaborator. I'm able to bounce ideas, and I have learned from my co-authors in various aspects of different skills, different mindsets. It has helped me over the last year or so to be a part of 2 major collaborative studies, and I hope to get these publications soon in the near future. I've become more aware of research. I'm able to critically appraise research better. I'm able to understand research better, and it has also helped me to understand the various vagaries and terminologies associated with scientific publications, such as indexes, what are the impact factor and citation factors of different journals, and so on and so forth. However, most of all, I feel it has helped me in my mental health. Currently, I feel over the last few years, I have become solution-based. For example, any articles I submit, I feel 7 out of 10 do come back. But my focused ideas have helped me to understand the problem as such and achieve a solution. It has taught me how to be patient. I'm better at pacing myself. However, I am also able to fix and stick to my timelines. I also understood that rejection is a part and parcel of any academic publications, but it has helped me to accept rejection as a part and move on. However, you would all be aware publication is not without its challenges. As I undertook this journey, I became aware and the need for competencies that I need to achieve to undertake these publications and also expand my ideas. Over the last 2-3 years, I've taken various courses in research and methodology and applied statistics, including updating my GCP and granular certificate for randomized controlled trials. I've expanded on hot topics to achieve various PubMed hot related topics. I also expanded in publishing an article on how to conduct a postgraduate virtual exam with reference to the current crisis we face and the reduction of face-to-face examination times. In fact, I've used COVID-19 as an opportunity rather than a crisis. So what does the future hold for me? I would like to continue with my academic progress. I would definitely like to become a member of a research committee, for example, NIHR, which will support me in my academic positions. It would be nice to be a part of a RCT or a MCT, but mainly I would like to motivate my colleagues, my trainees, my doctors in achieving presentations and publications. With this presentation, I hope I have given you a background what is achievable And I urge, if you are all interested, to take up tread or take a path which is less trodden. Finally, I would like to give my special thanks to Vijay and Professor Vaishya, who have been my co-authors in many of my articles, including Mr. Suraliwala and Sangani from my department. Most of all, I would like to thank my family for being the biggest critics of me. Hence, if you are interested in academic publications, just do it, and I'm sure you will get your rewards. Thank you.
Thank you, Kartik, for that presentation. Next, we have Professor Raju Vaishya, who's a senior orthopedic surgeon in Delhi. He's the master of publication, and he has published over 150 in the last year. He's also the current editor-in-chief of the Journal of Clinical Orthopedics and Traumatology, which is the official journal of Delhi Orthopaedic Association. I'm going to share his talk next, which is on editor's perspective. Thank you, Raju.
Good afternoon, friends. Let me take this opportunity to first of all thank my friend Professor Bijayendra Singh, who has given me this opportunity to share my views about the editorial process that takes place after you submit your paper to a journal. First of all, the authors must be sure whether they are ready to send their submissions for publication or not, because this is very important. If you have an outdated work with incorrect conclusions, or if it is merely a duplication of already published work, then you are certainly not ready to submit that article to any journal. Whereas you are ready if your uh, research has originality in results and methodology. Um, it has significant contribution to the published work if you feel, and it is up to date as far as the review of literature is concerned. So one must be sure whether they are ready or not. So before you submit an article, there is a checklist which must be followed by all authors. The most important in my mind as an editor is that the most authors do not pay attention to instructions for authors of the journal where they have submitted their work. It is very important to follow strictly the guidelines for authors of each journal, because that may be different from journal to journals. All the files that are submitted must be in correct file format and appropriate resolution, especially the figures. The spelling and grammars must be absolutely correct, um, and all the contact information of the author must be provided in required details. There should be a strong and persuasive cover letter written by the uh, the authors to the editors, so that he can understand the novelty of that paper from that simple covering letter, and then can proceed to handle with your submission. So, what is a strong manuscript? A strong manuscript is one which provides a clear, useful, and exciting message to the readers and editors, and it is presented in a constructive way, in a logical manner that allows readers to easily grasp the significance of your work. Uh, you can imagine that all editors, reviewers, and readers want to receive a well presented manuscript where they do not have to apply their mind too much to understand your work. So what happens is, once you submit a paper, it goes to the journal office where basic requirements are checked. If they met with the journal requirement, then it is assigned to an editor, which assigns then to reviewers. And once he received adequate number of reviews, usually 2 to 3 good reviews, then he makes a decision in the form of rejection or acceptance, or minor or major revision. Once the article is sent for revision, then you have to resubmit the revision in required time for further decision making. Uh, there are now many papers which are rejected immediately, or they are, as they say, they suffer from desk rejection. And it is very common in high impact journals where there is large volume of papers that are submitted. Uh, the reasons for desk rejection or immediate rejection is whether the article is out of scope, it doesn't fit into the style of journal or journal objectives. It lacks novelty, and it may be associated with fraud or plagiarism, which is a serious offense and should be avoided as far as possible. Or there may be some missing parts like figure references, etc. Um, Once the article is submitted for review, it is reviewed by experts in their field in the form of peer review, which is usually double blinded. So the reviewers do not know the identity of the authors or their institution. It helps to determine the quality, validity, significance, and originality of the research. And overall, their comments help to improve the quality of papers because they are specialists in the field and they are looking at these papers without any bias. So the reviewers are looking for novelty and technical quality, and the better it is, the chances of acceptance are really high. The editors are also quite busy in handling so many submissions, and they have to make a quick understanding and decision on several manuscripts. So first the editors look at the cover letter, then the abstract and conclusion, and the order of references, or the whether the references are outdated or are up to date. And from that, the editors can make a quick decision whether this article is good enough to be reviewed or not. If not, then it is rejected and sent back to the authors. Uh, they also check whether the article is in the scope of their journal and if it is likely to create sufficient impact on the current knowledge and cited in future by the other people. The reasons for rejection are the paper may be submitted to a wrong journal. There may be mismatch of quality, meaning thereby your paper may not be good enough for very high impact journals and vice versa. So do not aim too high if your work is not sufficiently of high quality in your mind. Better to go for a lower impact factor journal. There may be too many articles already published in that journal, so check before submitting. It may be badly written, casually written, and that should be avoided. You have to be very meticulous in completing your submission, writing your paper before submitting. There may be a flawed science with material derived from already published literature. So you have to be honest with yourself, other you may be caught in plagiarism, which is a serious offense. Your submission is likely to be accepted if it is within the scope of the journal, it has novelty, it adds to the present knowledge in the research field, and it is well prepared and formatted with all requirements met of that journal and written in a clear and concise language. And most important, it follows ethical standards. Most journal editors would like to publish good quality science in their journals for their readers and for future growth of the journal and also the reputation of the journal. So to sum up, the basic things about publication is that the readers must understand and read carefully the guidelines of the journal. They should check the scope of the journal, and they should submit their work to a suitable journal, not on ad hoc basis only. And you should make sure that your article is the best as it can be. So you have to make a sincere effort in improving the quality of the article, both in language form and in the scientific form, and avoid plagiarism before you submit it to any journal. Submission process involves a pre-check by the journal manager. Then it goes to the editor for possible further peer review. And then after peer reviews are received, the decision is made in the form of rejection, acceptance, revision, minor or major. And once the article is accepted, it is again a long process before it is actually published. It goes for copy editing, English editing, final proofreading is then done by the authors. And once the proofs are received by the journal office, then the production teams publish this journal online and offline as well. So a fair editorial process involves fair reviews and editors' collaboration with double blind review process. The editorial process should be fast enough to make an initial decision within 4 to 6 weeks, and it should be transparent so that authors are provided with a fact-based synthesis of their reviews so that they understand why the article has been rejected or sent for revision, and then they can improve on that for future. So friends, writing is a hard work, but once you are used to writing, then publishing is not so difficult. First few papers may be difficult, but once you make it a habit to publish regularly, it is not that difficult a process. So keep publishing, keep writing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raju. That was great. I mean, as you alluded at the end, that it's like an addiction. I certainly think it's like an addiction to get into publication, which becomes difficult. And sometimes the problem arises for people like me. Certainly, I can say for myself, maybe a bit of my generation was to get the references in place, in the right place, and I still have that. So I think I'm very much looking forward to hear from Nick. He's the techno expert about this. So this is his talk.
Good morning. My name is Nick Bakti. I'm one of the orthopedic consultants at William Harvey Hospital in Ashford. And I would like to say thank you for joining us at this week's BIOS webinar.
Sorry, apologies. I did introduce Nick to everybody. Nick Bakti is a shoulder and elbow surgeon at William Harvey Hospital in Kent.
I would also like to say thank you for Professor Singh for inviting me to be part of this week's webinar. Today, I would like to talk about referencing and citing and how to avoid a headache. In general, the topic of discussion today is why should we be using a referencing software and how to use one. The objectives that I would like to cover today is why we should be using one, what are your options out there, and we will go through very briefly a live demonstration on how to use one. So why use a referencing software? I feel that it very much depends on the article that you're writing. This article here, for example, only has 10 references, and it's perfectly doable to write your reference or manage your reference manually, as it's not too much of a hassle. It really becomes more important when you're writing a long article, such as a systematic review. And in this example, I had 4 pages of reference in my reference list, which covers about 78 references. It came into its own when I was required to add references or delete references, remove paragraphs which had references. And so I didn't have to bother too much with updating the reference numbers in the article and also the reference list. It also was hugely helpful when I had to publish my article and changing the format of my reference list to satisfy the requirements of different journals. And it definitely stopped me from punching a hole through my computer. So what are your options out there in terms of softwares? There are loads of options out there, and most of them are good. However, there are a few that are always mentioned, and this includes RefWorks by ProQuest. Mendeley is a very popular one, EndNote and Zotero. I've summarized here the top or the more popular 4 options for referencing. I personally use EndNote, and this is because it was free when I was a student. I used it then. I'm very comfortable with it, and I've stayed with it. I've summarized here the functions that these softwares have, such as integration with Microsoft Word, the ability to add references via PubMed ID number, and working offline. And as you can see, most of these softwares are able to do so. Zotero, I must say, is one of the more popular ones nowadays. Most of my registrars and juniors use this. And probably the most important function is that it's free, and it has all the other functionality of the more expensive software such as EndNote and RefWorks. So today I would like to go through just how to use one very briefly. I have chosen EndNote because I'm most comfortable with it, but I've kept the demonstration as relevant as possible to other softwares as well. So these steps should be relevant to the other mainstream referencing softwares. So we will go through how to add a reference from PubMed itself, or also how to add a reference from the software using PubMed ID numbers. We'll go through how to delete a reference individually and as a bulk, and we'll have a discussion about how to format references according to journal requirements as well. So, adding a reference. So, for example, in this article here, now I would like to add a reference between reference number 2 and reference number 3. Okay, so it's pretty simple. All you have to do, and we're going to do this via website. So this is the article that you've identified that you want to reference. At the top right hand corner, you can see there's a link for citation. If you click this link, it will show you how the reference should look like in the various formats in your reference list. But at the very bottom here, there is a RIS file that you can download, and this is the one that will be imported to your reference software. So all you do is you click that link, download the file, open your downloads folder, double click the file, which should import it straight to your reference software, as you can see here. Then you go back to your Word document and click on your reference software toolbar, insert citation, search for your reference, and click insert. And that's as simple as it gets. So as you can see here, it's added your reference into the article as reference number 3, and it's also updated your reference list to include all 4 references. So it's all pretty simple. As I mentioned earlier, you could also search for the article using PubMed ID number, and this example here is on EndNote, and all you have to do is paste the PubMed ID number here, click search, and the article should come out here, and it should be then be added onto your library. In order to add it to your article, follow the similar steps of using the toolbar and insert it into your article, and the software will again do the same for you. Now, moving on to deleting a reference. So we will first look at how we delete an individual reference. So in this example, we are going to delete reference number 3 here, which is Liberati et al. So all you do is you utilize the toolbar again, go up to citations and edit citations, identify the reference that you want to delete, click the settings button, remove citation, and click OK. The software will then update not only the reference number in the article itself, but also the reference list, all automatically and all pretty seamless. And this is how you do it, individual references. It's also pretty simple if you decide to change your article and delete whole paragraphs which has references in it. So in this example here, as you can see, we've got 25 references in the article and in the list. And we wanted to remove this whole paragraph here because it's not needed anymore. So all we do is highlight that paragraph, delete, and the software will do it for you. So now as you can see, only 22 references in the article and 22 references in the list. So again, all pretty seamless. You don't have to then update the list and the numbers in the article. Finally, formatting your reference list. So as you would have noticed, different articles have different requirements for their reference lists. For example, the Journal of Clinical Orthopedics and Trauma requires superscript Arabic numerals in the article itself, and in the reference list, they want their reference to be formatted in the AMA style. And for the Journal of Shoulder and Elbow Surgery, it's slightly different. They want their reference list in the Vancouver style. If you've got 78 references, this can be quite tedious to make sure that you've changed everything manually. But if you use a referencing software, it's all pretty simple. All you have to do is click the format that you want on the toolbar, and the referencing software does it for you within a minute or two. So it's all pretty simple. You may not find the format that you want in this toolbar, and if that's the case, all you have to do is to go to the software's website, and this example is EndNote, search for the journal that you're interested in, and it will give you a result of the style that you want. You download this folder, click it, and it should be imported into your referencing software, and it should come up on that list. That was for the Journal of Shoulder and Elbow Surgery, and this is for the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery. So all in all, I think using a referencing software is advantageous for many reasons. There are loads of options out there. So start exploring. Start with using them for simple articles with few references so that you can familiarize yourself as to which one works best for your working style, and it undoubtedly will make you more efficient when publishing your work and reduce the amount of stress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick, very much. So we've had three great presentations, and Amit is going to start the Q&A session.
Yeah, so hi guys, I echo BJ's comments, fantastic speakers, the first three. I'm looking for any questions that anybody has put forward. I don't see any. So let me start with you, Kartik. Let's just open up. So Kartik, this was a absolutely fantastic presentation. And I think the journey that you describe is so much, difficult for a clinically oriented orthopedic surgeon to achieve, which you've done. So my question I would like to put forward to you is, how do you think, first of all, it's two parts. The first thing is whether you think that the researching or abilities that you have has changed your clinical perspective and how much of impact that has had. And of course, the second issue is how much of time do you think during your training period would one have to allocate, do you think, towards this kind of activity to build up on it? Because it would be nice if the trainees did it right from the beginning and continued then thereafter.
Thank you, Professor Tolat. I think I'll answer the second question first. The time, as I think publication work is not a 9-to-5 job. So you need to spend time after your working hours, after your clinical duties, and in the evenings, and there is no weekend break. So find time, not in your clinical hours, but out of hours. That's where I think I got most of my stuff done. Secondly, I would suggest have a peer group. So you need to have a core group of 3 to 4 or 5 guys with you, with whom you can collaborate. You can chat. You can, nowadays the technology is such that you can use a Zoom on one side, open a Google Drive on the other side, speak on the Zoom, and keep editing on the software on Google Drive. I found that excellent. So you get all your co-authors in one place, and you can edit at the same time and forget about. Coming to the first part of the question, I think learning, reading about different subjects has made me more influential in my workload. I can relate to the COVID guidelines better, and also put them in practice in my clinic area or in theater. If someone says, "Oh, which PP? Why not that PP?" I am able to debate that. So I think that's where that has helped me clinically.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you very much. I think these are all very valid points, and all the people listening should be aware of this, that you do have to make that extra effort. You do have to burn the midnight oil, so to say, to get where you
Indeed,
are.
indeed.
Thank you for that. So
Amit, can
next,
I just
yeah,
add a
Please.
comment?
sure,
First
sure.
of all, I would like to congratulate Kartik for escalating his numbers in last year. The number of publications were phenomenal. And certainly, as he confessed, COVID has helped him. It gave a lot of ideas, teamwork, and time to do so. And I would certainly, as editor in chief, would promote him because of his higher H index. I can assure him. And here, one point, as Bijayendra said, that publication is difficult, but it is a thing which must be done. Um, I always say research is repulsive to most people, and it's not a cup of tea for most people as they think. But once you have a publication, it becomes an addiction. So research is repulsive, but publication is addictive. So if you do a couple of publication, then you will not stop. You will keep doing, and um, you will you will find that other people are not doing it. You see, and why I was not doing it before. So it gives you name, it gives you reputation, and the biggest thing, it gives you inner sense of satisfaction that you have contributed something good for rest of the world to see and follow you. Thank you.
Yeah, very true, very true. And I like that phrase. Research is repulsive, but publication is addictive. I think
Yes.
that's an important point for everybody listening to take away. The second point one could add also is that rejection should not be considered as a situation that you sit back and get depressed. It should be taken positively as a way to resubmit or to look at yourself and improve the way you are doing things and resubmit that so that you're successful. So, Raju, thank you very much for your excellent talk. It was really, really great to see you with your editor-in-chief hat telling us all about how to do it. Now, what I would like to ask you is, there is quite a lot on the strength of evidence, which relates to obviously the study, your design, your precision, the relevance, and obviously any reporting bias that comes into it. So, what do you actually lay more emphasis on, or is this a conjoint decision made by the section editors or the sub editors who support that and send it across to you?
You see, once I received the manuscript, uh, until now, I used to handle all the manuscript as the first-hand transaction. Now that we have section editors. First of all, I used to see what is the content in the manuscript, and is it suitable for our journal or not, and also check how much is the similarity and plagiarism in it, how much has been copied and pasted. As an editor, you can actually smell a manuscript. You can say that this manuscript is just a replication of an old work which was done 5 years, 10 years ago as a thesis part, and has been now the authors have got some time to submit it. So we really want good quality submissions and good quality publication for the journal, not only to improve its growth, but also to improve its quality standard name and H-index, which is now considered most important for the reputed authors to contribute to that journal and to receive good citation index like site score and impact factor. So every journal would like to publish more papers with higher level of evidence or hierarchy, as they say. As you know, we have 5 level of hierarchy. So higher the level of the evidence is there for a manuscript, the more likely it is going to be published. But you have to be very careful these days because people try to manufacture these papers, especially from eastern part of the world. And one must have good statistician, good editorial team who can judge these papers, especially systematic reviews. You should not get befooled or bullied by just the statistics and lots of other stuff that is presented to you. Content has to have a good objective, good methodology, good results, and the results and objectives should match to their conclusion. They should not arbitrarily make conclusion which has not been done.
So thank you very much. That's very valid points, all of them. And again, may I congratulate you on the journey of the JCOT. It's absolutely phenomenal. The last year has seen you increase your citation index and publication rate manyfold over. So thank you very much for the talk. I'll move on now to Nick's paper. And Nick, this was an excellent presentation. Absolutely first class for us to see how the referencing software can be used to ease our load. In my times, I used to often get the secretary to just change the references as per the style of the paper, which was
the difference.
To do that, do it yourself.
The difference is, Prof. Tolat, is that you have a secretary. I don't.
We are living in the virtual age, and I think that is an amazing, piece of kit to work from. So I do have a question from Nitish, who's put it forward to ask you whether these reference software are intercompatible. In other words, you can export a reference list from endpoint to Zotero or Zotero to Mendeley and vice versa. What do you think?
Technically, they all speak the same language, technically. But from experience, having used EndNotes, sometimes when you try to edit an article or a paper that's been written with other softwares like Zotero, sometimes there's translational problems when importing it. So what I would suggest is that you choose one that the whole team is using. I don't get any royalties or any money for promoting it, but I do feel that EndNote is pretty good. But I think as a whole, as a package, Zotero is probably the one that as a team you should use because it's free. And it's compatible for Macs and Windows. And I just think that the user interface is much better compared to EndNote as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just a separate issue, really, and not completely correlated to your talk, but just as a guide to our trainees and others who are starting out doing research. What do you do? Is there a particular search engine that you use for your resources? I mean, you have to, obviously it depends on the type of paper that you are writing, but is there some common advice that you can give to people starting off doing this to make their life easier?
So I think the oracle of academic paper has to be PubMed, because it's not limited only for medical journals, but it's all scientific journals. So I think the one of the first steps that you have to familiarize yourself with is the advanced search in PubMed on how to use the different keywords and the booleans and everything to narrow down on your search, so you don't get 200,000 results, but you get the 20 that's relevant to the article that you're writing.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point because you often, if you don't put the correct words into the search engine, you come up with is that old adage, isn't it? You don't put in the right thing, you get garbage out, and then you don't know
Correct.
what to do about it. Thank you very
Correct.
much. That was an
No
excellent
problem.
talk with great practicality on how to use referencing software and make your life so much easier. Thank you. I think I'll bring this first three speaker session to an end now. BJ, you want
Thank
to?
you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Amit. Excellent session. Next, we've got Professor Amar Rangan, who doesn't need much introduction, but he's the current president of the British Elbow and Shoulder Society. He's a consultant surgeon at South Tees Hospitals. He also holds a chair at the Mary Kinross Trust and Royal College of Surgeons, as well as the Oxford University. He was the chair of the BIOS Research Committee from 2013 to 2018, and he has managed to get multi-center, multiple research ongoing. So one of the things that even Kartik mentioned in his talk was about getting the funding and getting involved in multiple research. So this is a talk by Amar on how to get research funding.
So, hi everyone. Bijay has asked me to talk about getting research funding. It's a huge topic in itself, and it's very difficult to cover that in 10 minutes. So I thought what would be useful is perhaps just to give you an overview, an outline of what's involved, more in terms of what the prerequisites are in seeking and securing research funding. And beyond that, we can talk a little bit about the funding streams that are currently available. So the first thing to do is to try and work out what's the purpose of the funds. Broadly, there are two types. There's those that support individuals to develop, mainly in terms of doctoral, postdoctoral fellowships, and NHR investigator and senior investigator awards. For the purposes of this talk, though, I think it'll be more relevant for us if I concentrate on how we can secure funding for specific research projects, particularly clinical research, which I think is likely to be most relevant to us all. So broadly, there's commercial research and non-commercial research. The principles are similar in terms of how you build up to secure a grant in either of these streams of funding. And so let's just look at the prerequisites as to what's actually required and how you can get ready with a robust and competitive grant proposal that's likely to succeed. One of the good things about trauma and orthopedics is more recently we have become good at actually securing funds for high-level research, high-quality research, which has quite a significant global impact. So let's just look at the prerequisites then. When you start off with a research question, it's important that you clarify the research question and write a study protocol. That's the starting point for all this. And again, broadly, these are the main areas you need to clarify. In terms of the clinical aspects, it's a question of who, what, and why questions, and practical is where, when, and how questions. For example, for the clinical side, who are your participants, study participants? So how do you define the study population? What are your interventions? What are your outcomes? What is it that you're measuring? And why is it that this research is important? And these are very key questions. And one of the ways in which you can get this kind of clarification is so-called the PICO method, where you look at where you define the participants, the intervention, the comparator, and the outcomes. For example, we're currently running the Prof 2 trial, which is basically a trial comparing two types of arthroplasty for 3- and 4-part proximal humeral fractures. So the broad question to start with as a study idea was, what's the role of arthroplasty in severe proximal humeral fractures? So to get a clarified research question, you would define the PICO, and it would go something like, in patients over the age of 65 who sustain 3 and 4-part displaced proximal humeral fractures, is reverse shoulder arthroplasty clinically superior and more cost-effective than a hemiarthroplasty or structured non-surgical treatment? So you're kind of defining the participants, the interventions, the comparator, and what are the outcomes you're measuring, which is the clinical and cost effectiveness broadly. So that's how you go about defining a study question. And practically, you would then, within the protocol, work out where is this going to be done, the setting, and when. You need to actually have a clear timeline for the project and include a Gantt chart, which actually ties you down to how you meet the study deadlines and timelines. And then how are you going to do this? What's the study method? Is it a randomized trial? Is it an observational study, cohort study, etc.? So the first question then, as I said, is perhaps the most important one when it comes to trying to convince a funding body to invest in your project is to convince them that your research is actually really, really important. Now, from a funder's perspective, they get many of these ideas come to them and proposals come to them, and they need to decide whether investing in a project that talks about saving lives from treating cancer or severe heart disease, or do they fund a project which says, if you add an additional screw to a plate, would that make the fracture heal better? So these are the kinds of questions that they need to, I mean, that's an extreme example, but I'm just saying that we're actually competing against some really important public health questions that actually come to the funding bodies. So we need to be much more savvy in how we actually convince the funding body that our research is important. So there are two ways of doing it. There's the commission calls that come out from funders where they have already prioritized the research question based on background work that's already happened. And that's the easy win, where you kind of overcome that first hurdle of convincing the funding body that that particular research is important. The second bit is the researcher-led call, which is where you would apply to a funding body with your research question to convince them that that's an important question. So that's the challenge. There are many ways of doing it in terms of identifying a research question that's important, including conducting systematic reviews to identify the question, looking at registry data, preliminary work. And also there's this James Lind Alliance Priority Setting Partnership. There are a number of these that have happened in TNO in recent years, and many of these have been published, and this is an example of what we did for surgery for shoulder pain. These identify the top 10 priorities within each area. And this is a very powerful way of lobbying funding bodies to invest in these research questions. And these are done as a partnership between clinicians, other stakeholders, and patients. And so, for example, in this particular list of questions from shoulder surgery, 4 of them have been already picked up by the NIHR to be put out as commission calls. So they have already prioritized these as research questions. So this is a powerful way of doing it. And then you need to write your protocol. So there are various existing bits of infrastructure that you can link with to help you. One of the key things is the NIHR Research Design Service, and they help with any non-commercial research if you wish to develop a protocol for an important study question. Alternatively, you might have people within your R&D department and a friendly academic or somebody within your team or a neighboring hospital who might have had experience with doing this. You can ask them if they've got the time to help you write the study protocol. There's local university departments and the expertise within that, particularly in clinical trials units where you can link with to help develop your protocol. Once you've done that, it's a question of assembling the team. It's important that you have the required breadth and the depth of expertise for running that particular study and delivering it. And once again, you link with existing infrastructures like clinical trials units and the BRCs that can help you run the research. And in many ways, there's no need to replicate this because there's quite a big research infrastructure that's available for us all to access. A key thing here, increasingly nowadays, is patient and public involvement. So right from the start, you've got to get patients involved in verifying and backing your research question and the study protocol. So in terms of funding, the National Institute for Health Research is now the largest funder for health research. Annual budgets of over £1 billion. We only access a very small aspect, a small proportion of this. A few years ago, it was less than 2% for all surgical research, and TNO was even a smaller percentage of that. But we are getting better because we are able to engage with more robust proposals and more robust research questions that are being commissioned. So this is the mission statement for on the back of which the NIHR was created. Best research for best health was the government's health research strategy, and it clearly states the relevance to patients and the public. So it's important that we keep that in mind. Now, NIHR funds most of this critical path within the UK health research, and this is the innovation pathway going from innovation at the left side of the screen over to the final healthcare delivery on the right end of the screen. So this critical path within the UK health research is where most of the investment is taking place in clinical research. There's again a translational pathway shown, but just to say that there's also other health charities and small grants that you can access. Typically AO does give out small grants. There's specialty associations. BESS has bump priming grants, for example, and the Royal Colleges. The NIHR has a number of work streams going from systematic reviews to public health research. So there are various streams of funding that you can access based on the nature of your project. But you will get advice on this from the existing expertise within universities and the academic units that you can link up with. Commercial research has very similar pathways. The industry might prioritize a project and then approach you to run the project for them, and that's the industry-sponsored study. Or you might go to industry with an idea about their product to say that it's a research that you want to run to investigate the effectiveness of their product, and that's the investigator-initiated study. And so these are the streams that are available. And rather than a clinical trials unit for commercial research, the contract research organization is the body that helps run that type of research. So broadly, that's about, that's an overview of what's required to get a grant proposal together and a brief overview of the types of funding that you might be able to access. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amar. That was excellent talk as always. Now I'm going to ask Lado to get his talk ready. So Lado is an orthopedic and a shoulder surgeon from Ljubljana in Slovenia. He is author of multiple publications as well as books. He manages complex shoulder problems. He's the current chair of the European Shoulder Association, part of the ESCA, and he's kindly given his time to help with this. So whenever you're ready, Lado, to share your screen.
Bijay, thank you for your invitation and introduction. Thank you for organizers, and it is my great pleasure to be today here with you. I hope that my screen is shared and that you can hear me. Okay, so in this talk about the abstract, I will try to present why is the abstract important, what we have to consider, what are requirements, what is necessary in terms of quality, and I will try to give you some suggestions how to write the abstract. So why is abstract important? This is in fact the only part of the paper which is seen when you search the articles through the databases like PubMed and so on. And many times it is the only part of the article which is noted and read besides the title. It is, of course, also the only part of the article published in proceedings of the conference. And if you are a reviewer, this is the part which is available together with invitation to review the article for specific journals. How we actually read the scientific articles. First, for impression of the article, we look at it and we read the title, of course. Next, we read the abstract, or at least a part of it. Only if we have a deep interest and if we want better understanding, then we look at the content. Usually we address introduction and discussion, and we leave materials and results. People actually read entire paper only if they have specific interest and if are looking for thorough understanding. This is actually the everyday's life. So keeping this in mind, for the majority of readers, the paper does not exist beyond its abstract. This is why it is important and has to be written with certain quality. The abstract is actually also like advertisement of your scientific work. You will make a first impression with it. And this is also the first step how to reach the appropriate audience. So what are the requirements of the abstract? Abstract should give appropriate impression on the paper, on its content, and second, abstract should be representative on the entire paper. To achieve this, we have to consider some details. Abstract is actually condensed and concentrated version of full text. It has to be sufficiently representative. That means that it could work as a standalone document. It has to be as detailed as possible with the known limits. And so you need precise writing skills and fine judgment, what is necessary to put in and what is not. It has to contain as much information as possible related to the aim of the article and the research idea. Next, it should not present a biased picture. It is not difficult to put in favorable outcomes or findings that support your hypothesis, but it is also important that you put in non-significant and adverse findings. You should mention this, and here we come to the ethics of the publishing. And the abstract should be written in the way that the reader is able to independently evaluate our author's conclusions. So be careful about the space. The formal structure is usually limited with the number of the words, usually between 200 and 250. And abstract is usually structured. The main subjects are, of course, background, introduction, methods, results, conclusion. But some paper will have also other subjects like objectives, purposes, limitations, clinical relevances, and so on. but this is usually available in the instruction of the journal. So if we analyze important ones, the first one is the background. It is written to set the scene, to provide the reader with the background of the topic which is researched, to set what is known about the subject and what is not known. And out of this, to tell what is your intention to examine and what you want to present. This is usually the shortest part of the abstract. Usually 2 to 3 sentences are enough. If longer, you will lose the space for other points which are actually more important, so you have to avoid unnecessary content. The second part is our methods, and methods are giving the summary of the study design. So information, what was done and how was done. And this is the second longest part in the abstract. This part will give the information on what is the research design, inclusion criteria, setting of the study, sample of the patient, size, different groups if you have them, treatment applied, duration of the study, research instruments. This is very important. And what is the primary outcome measure and how is defined. The next is the results. This is actually the purpose of your paper. You present the findings of your study. This is the main reason for reading and to learn about the findings. It is the most important and the longest part of the abstract, and nothing should compromise its range and quality. Usually it's packed with data because you want to put it in as much details as possible about the findings. You have to present the number of patients, results of the analysis of the primary objectives, results of other findings. You have to present also main statistical analysis, give the information about the mean standard deviations, survival rate, etc. If possible, you have to include effect size, relative risk, number need to trip, for example, and so on. It is necessary also to include important negative findings. This is very important. Findings that fail to support the hypothesis and data on improvement on important adverse events, complications, and so on. And the final part is conclusions. It contains the most important take-home message of the study. In the few precisely worded sentences, you have to give primary take-home message, explain additional findings and unexpected findings, and finally give the future perspective. Sometimes we can give also our opinion on implications or importance of the findings. Despite its brevity, this section has a great and important impact in the readers. Readers actually trust the authors, therefore conclusions must be honest. You must not claim more than data demonstrate. What is unnecessary in the abstract? Remember that your space is limited, so there is no citation of the references, details about routine practice and procedures, details about statistical methods, details about statistical criteria. The p-value is usually sufficient. It is important that whatever is present in the abstract, it must also be present in the text, and whatever errors should not be made in text, they should not appear in abstract as well. Remember that your bias and enthusiasm will influence the readers and avoid unjustified speculations. So my suggestions would be, read the journal instructions. They will give you information. Tailor your abstract to the journal requirements. You can use another abstract as a model for learning, and consider giving your work to another person, perhaps colleague. If he or she will understand the content, this is already very well. Some take-home messages or tips: write the paper first and abstract is summary of at the end. Introduction in background should lead into a statement of your aim. describe your methodology briefly, clearly describe the most important findings, state the conclusions concisely, and avoid overstatements, and remember what is necessary content and avoid what is unnecessary. Thank you for your attention. As a ESA chair, I would like to invite you to Specialty Days in November and ESCA Virtual Congress, which will be in May. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Lado. That was a very good presentation. I must say what you said early is agree that basically, you read the abstract first, and depending on what the abstract feels like, then you go and read the whole paper. It's like watching the trailer of a movie, and the better you put the trailer, the more likely you will get people to see. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Maneesh for his talk. Maneesh is the current education secretary of BIOS, helps putting all these webinars in place. And also not many people may be aware, but he's into writing books. I think he's published 3, Maneesh, books already, and he's the book wizard. So over to you if anybody's looking to write a book.
Thank you, Vijay. Can you hear me and can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you very much. I'm humbled. I've written only 2 books and third is on the way. So that's very kind of you to give that introduction, Vijay. I've just reflected on what I've done so far, and I'll just try to share my experience with you. So this is my journey. So 2013, I came up with an idea. I wanted to write a book which was useful for GPs. I mean, reason being, my wife is a GP, and a huge amount of work comes in general practice, about 60% being related to orthopedics. And the MSK educational element, GPs always complain. So I thought that, asking my colleagues to write chapters on their subspecialties, we can try to publish a book. So then the next task was to find a publisher, and that is one of the most difficult tasks. So it took me a while. It took me over 6 months of constant emailing people, chasing around that, look, I've got an idea, I want to publish a book. And finally, I found a publisher in 2014 called Radcliffe Publishers. And they agreed, and things started moving ahead. But then what happened is in 2015, Radcliffe was a relatively small company, and then they were taken over by a much bigger company. But that turned like a blessing in disguise, because the company which took them over was CRC Press, which were a very big multinational company. And they took all the projects with them as well. And then my first book, therefore, An Orthopedics Guide for Today's GP, was published in 2017 by CRC Press. And then, because obviously I'd done a lot of groundwork, I started knowing people in CRC Press. Then I came up with a second idea about injections and alternative treatment options. And I started straight away once I finished my first book. And 2 years later, I published the second book as musculoskeletal injections and alternative options. And as soon as I had done that, I had already got the idea of writing a book now on foot and ankle surgery. And the current project is bigger than the first 2. The number of authors in this book is double. I want more than double, 44 authors. So big team. This book covers essentially everything in foot and ankle, and I'm really excited, and hopefully it will be published this year in May. So coming to why would you write a book? I think the important reasons which I see are, first of all, you need to have a passion. You need to be motivated. Once fulfilled, the book will give you, writing a book successfully will give you accomplishment, achievement. And then there is a financial motive as well, but the way I see it, it's not that big. You don't get a big royalty. I mean, considering the time you have put in. So financial motive could be there, but it's the least important as I think. What is involved? So, I mean, we have touched on publishing, and it's not different from other thing, but essentially, I've tried to break it. So first of all, you need to come up with an idea or a need. So is there anything in the market? Is there a topic you like to write upon? And is there anything, what has been written? So it has to be some sort of unique, a niche topic you come up with. And then, as Amar was saying, the next important bit is to write a proposal. So you need to write a fairly detailed proposal as to what the book will consist of, how many chapters will it have, what topics, what sort of authors, who would it cater to, word count, approximate word count, illustration count, will it have videos, and so on. And if possible, at this time, the publishers like to see a model chapter of the book as well. So if you write a proposal, if you attach a model chapter, then that's more useful. And then you send that proposal to publishers, and a lot of publishers would reject. I mean, I know one of my senior colleagues had been with an idea for last 6 years, and finally he managed to find a publisher, and he's just published a book. So it can take a while. Publisher, if they agree, then they will send your proposal to external reviewers, depending between 2 to 4. And then the reviewers will say, these are the strengths, these are the weaknesses, and then you'll be asked to respond. Finally, when all this goes through, then the next thing comes as you need to find a team. And that's very important because the authors are the one you're relying upon. To write a book single-handedly, it can be done, but it is very difficult. And all my books so far have been, based on my wonderful team. And then the different types of, pressures. Then you have to keep up to the deadlines. You have to keep reminding people. You have to, make sure that everybody is actively involved. And then once you finally receive the manuscript, then you need to go through these and then edit them, send it to publishers. And then it goes into more proof, copy editing, things like that. And finally, one day, the final product you'll be able to see if you keep on doing this. So that is what is involved. What can go wrong? There are lots of things. To start with, it's very difficult to find a willing publisher. Now, as I said, in my first company, it changed hands, and that took a lot of time, or it can go bust. Authors, you really want your product is going to be as good as the team of your authors. And unfortunately, sometimes authors might say yes, but then they might say no. It has happened to me. Might sleep on it. You need to constantly chase them. Or sometimes it's happened in this book that, despite everything, the final product which I have received, I was rather disappointed. So then I had to get another author involved to get them as a co-author and write the whole chapter again. Or sometimes I had to put in my foot in as editor, and I have to contribute rather actively, rewrite the whole chapter myself. Illustrations, again, very important. You need original illustrations, you need consent. If they are not original, then you need to take permission. Quality has to be good. Sometimes you need to get them redrawn. Then the editorial assistant. So you are liaising with someone on the other side of the publishing team. And that, sometimes you can get a person who is not very switched on. In my last book, the editorial assistant went off sick, and I couldn't exchange emails for all 6 months. Or, put it mildly, sometimes you think, oh my God, what's the point of having them? I would rather do the work myself. copy editing, I mean, this book on foot and ankle surgery has been outsourced abroad. And that's given me a big headache on its own, because then the copy editors decided to change a lot of things. So for example, they played with the degrees of all authors. So they took out FRCS or they took out FRCS trauma and orth, instead put everyone FRCS, whether you've done MRCS or FRCS trauma and orth. Everybody they put Milton Keynes as an author and things like that. So, that can be in this day and age, especially when things go for outsourcing, that can be a headache on its own. So to summarize, if you are going to write a book, what are the things you need? And I think important is that you need to be passionate about something you want to write about. You need to be resilient, bounce back. You need to have resources. You need to know people. You need to have good contacts. It's important to have good organizational skills, because as an editor, if you slow down, then that doesn't reflect very well on your team. You need to work hard and you need to have patience. Is it worth the effort? For me, yes. Raju said in his presentation, not a cup of tea for everyone. And I say the same thing, that writing a book is not a cup of tea for everyone. However, if you are interested, motivated, then once your project is finished, it gives you immense source of fulfillment, achievement, and pride. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maneesh, for an excellent talk. I'd like to thank everybody who has presented so far. There's a few questions that has come, and I'll go by the way it comes. So the first is for Amar. The difference between commercial and non-commercial sort of funding. That's one. The second one is a slightly cynical view of my co-host, but I think it's quite true. I mean, I also feel like that sometimes whether the research done via the NIHR is done to stop some treatment within the NHS.
Okay, yeah, can you hear me, Vijay?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I think that's a really good question. I think what might be useful to consider is, for most health economies, the amount of money available for service for any particular area is finite. So it's like the cake is the same size. So it's a question of how well you slice it. It determines how effective your healthcare service is. And so rather than cost saving, I would probably look at it as being a way in which you can actually guide appropriate commissioning in terms of saying which are the most effective interventions for which a health economy can invest to make our services most efficient. So the cost effectiveness analysis is frequently run alongside large-scale clinical trials. So most of the clinical trials we run, there's so much data that it's a missed opportunity, I think, if we don't do it. And that's one of the reasons why we do it. The NIHR is keen on cost effectiveness research, and you're absolutely right. It has something to do with efficiency and cost savings for the NHS. But increasingly globally, I think people are looking at what we're doing in the UK in terms of cost effectiveness analysis, because commissioning decisions in most health economies are actually based on what comes out of these trials and the cost effectiveness work. So just to give an example, a colleague of mine who works in the Center for Health Economics in New York actually did a very nice analysis on cost effectiveness of orthopedic interventions that were done alongside clinical trials in the UK and NIHR trials. Out of 14 of those interventions that were investigated, I think there were 3 which were noted to be not cost effective, but the rest were deemed to be cost effective. And so it's a way in which you're kind of targeting your resources towards concentrating on those cost-effective interventions rather than diverting them to ones which are not cost-effective. And so I think that's the way I would look at it in terms of being able to influence policy in a positive way. But yes, in some areas, if the intervention isn't cost effective, it would lead to cost savings, which can be diverted elsewhere.
And the second one was on the commercial versus non-commercial research, whether one is sort of not construed isn't the right word, but taken that the commercial one is likely to be felt that is more biased, or how do you avoid that? Is that right, Maneesh?
Yeah, that's what the question was. That an example was if an implant making company sponsors a randomized controlled trial for implant versus an alternative, could that induce a lot of bias, and would it be looked inferior in terms of quality?
Potentially, but you can mitigate that as long as your protocol is robust and you have independent oversight of what you're doing. You can mitigate those issues. One of the things that even the commercial companies are now looking at is to have the clinical affairs side of it, or clinical investigation side of it, separate from their sales and separate from the marketing side of it, so that it reduces that amount of bias as to how the output of a study can be influenced by the service level engagement. So that there are ways of mitigating it, but I would say that even if it's an industry sponsored study, as long as you have a robust protocol that's actually peer reviewed and approved, and also you have independent oversight to ensure that the actual trial is conducted rigorously, and you have independent analysis of the study results. Although the funding source is from somebody who has a vested interest, you can actually mitigate those issues, I think. So that's the best you can do with commercial studies. So there are ways of doing it.
Thank you, Amar. One question, another one that came in, perhaps as you as the best president had, or the Professor Lado as the European shoulder and Raju as editor-in-chief, is, which I always had trouble, is finding a good statistician. Some people are good with it, but is there any help that is reasonably easily accessible? Or suggestions, really, or you just struggle and find a good one?
Do you want me to go first? Or?
Yeah, go, Amar, yes.
So in the initial stages, when I started off on this path, I struggled, but then it gets easier once you get to know people, once you make the links. So I absolutely agree, it is a difficult one. Although there are statistical packages you can use, and if you've done a bit of background statistical work, you can use things like SPSS, GraphPad, Prism, or Stata. There are a number of those out there that you can use to export Excel worksheets into, which brings out some analysis that you actually wanted to do. But in reality, the statistical side, for it to be statistically robust, it needs a lot more thought right from the outset, rather than a post hoc analysis. It has to be predetermined, and there has to be a proper statistical analysis plan that's worked out at the outset before you embark on it. So I would suggest that if you want a good, robust study with good results that are credible, it's better to engage with somebody right up front. And I don't know the answer to it. If you don't have the links already, it's a difficult one. You've just got to try and make those links, I think.
Thank you, Amar.
Bijayendra,
yeah.
Bijayendra, most of the hospitals and institutes now have a statistician. But the problem which they normally face is they don't get the correct questions put on to them. They just say, this is the data, just give us some statistics out of it, right? So the authors or researchers are themselves not very clear what do they want to know. So your research question has to be very crisp, clear, and practical, based on your study. And then this, if you sit with statisticians, they will come out with good solutions.
Thank you. Thank you, Raju. Lado, anything to add to that?
To the statistician.
Yeah.
I think that statisticians are a very important part of the working process on the article. Actually, I have to say that it is important that it is involved from the beginning of the process. In the when you design the study, there are already important ones. We have normally just background knowledge of the statistics, but we don't. Me personally, I don't know really statistics into details, and sometimes it is important to have a good talk with the statisticians and to see what can you do in the study and how can you analyze the results.
Thank you. I think that's the key message here is that, I guess it depends on what type of study you're doing. I mean, if you're doing a randomized control trial or something reasonably big, then your best bet is to start before you actually embark on the study. Otherwise, or do a pilot study beforehand. Otherwise, you could end up with a data which is not of much use. Lado, there's a question for you about the abstracts and level of evidence.
Yeah, thank you. It's important. Yes, some journals requires in abstract in the separate part the level of evidence, but otherwise, I think that it should be clearly seen from the methods. So the methods already described. This is retrospective, prospective study, randomized. If you have a control group and so on. So I don't think it's really necessary to put in the level of the evidence, but it is normally seen from the methods if they are good written.
Thank you, Lado. Maneesh, question for you. I've been bitten or burned twice by publishers who initially chased me to start writing books, and then one of them actually took me to the middle stages where you write a chapter, submit it, and then they said, sorry, we don't want to publish this anymore. So well done you on that. The question was, is it easier to publish ebooks?
I haven't done, so I don't know the answer. I guess it's easier if I think you're talking about going in Amazon and finding a publisher or writing an ebook yourself. I guess it's much easier, but I haven't done it. I mean, the books which I've written have ebook element, all of them these days. They are published in hard copy as well as electronic format. But to do ebook on its own could be easier, but I don't have experience in that, Vijay.
Thank you. Any questions from anybody else?
I saw a comment from Raju.
Yeah. Go on, Maneesh.
Raju had written, just reading, writing a multi-author book is like a double-edged sword. I agree completely, Raju. You are relying on a lot of people. You're relying on a team. But if I think about it, so for example, my current book on foot and ankle, I think there are chapters which I couldn't have written. So chapter on orthotics, prosthetics, amputation. And then, foot and ankle is such a vast specialty that, each toe has its expert these days. Whether you do ankle fusion, you do arthroplasty, you do sports injuries. So, bringing in lots of authors brings a lot of specialism, their ideas. And I think as an editor, your job becomes then, marrying the ideas to the book and, everybody's speaking sort of the same language. So it is more difficult, but I think the end product probably, in my view, would be better with writing with a team.
Yeah, Maneesh, I agree. Nowadays, we see more and more multi-author books being edited by one or two editors of that specialty, and it brings out good quality. But the problem that we normally face is to meet the timelines. You see, you have to chase the authors, then the quality, content quality. A lot of authors do not bother to avoid plagiarism, write in different ways. So there is no uniformity in that book for the readers. So one has to set goals about timelines, about the format of the book, and everybody has to follow. See, somebody may write 20 pages for a chapter, another one is only 5 pages. Somebody have 120 references, other person has only 30 references. So, that mismatches the quality, but as you publish more books, you will understand that there are challenges that can be overcome to bring out better quality books.
Absolutely. And you are absolutely right that from the outset, it's really important to have very, very clear instructions to your group. So you need to specify and define everything that, look, the chapter length has to be this much. This is what going to be word count, the illustrations maximum this is going to be the writing style. This is going to be the referencing style. You need to give them a model chapter. But despite of that, obviously, as you've said, everybody doesn't stick. And then you have to then, obviously, you are editor, so you take that responsibility and deal with it.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
On that note, I think I'm going to bring this to a close. Amit, did you have anything to say?
No, I was just going to congratulate Maneesh, and I wanted to say that you need obviously very high level of passion and motivation to do this, because it's such a difficult job to get a book out, really. So congrats and well done, and all the best for the third one. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very easy, actually. Sit outside in the garden with your dog, have a beer, and then just nobody disturbs you.
I should try.
On that note, I think we should bring this to a close. Thank you, everybody, for giving that time this morning. That includes Lado, Kartik, Raju, Nick, Amar, and Maneesh for the excellent presentations. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.